Can you survive in Project Zomboid without any arms or legs? I installed a number of mods from the Steam Workshop that transformed my character into a quadruple amputee. Without arms, I won't be able to use weapons, open windows, and every action becomes much slower. Being bound to a wheelchair, I won't be able to run or crouch, and all around my life becomes much harder. If I'm able to find a magazine to make a prosthetic, I might actually have a chance of surviving. So with that in mind, I chose traits that suited my horrible life and decided to choose Riverside as my spawn location. Let's get into it. I started off in a trailer park right outside the city. In this part of town, there were very few zombies to worry about. However, it wasn't very abundant in supplies. Regardless, I decided to check the cabinets for a snack. I found a loaf of bread and began to eat, but that's when I realized that without any arms, eating was a very slow and challenging process. In the rest of the trailer, there was a whole lot of nothing, but I did find some glasses, because the idea of a blind amputee is much funnier. When I made it over to the neighboring trailer, I jiggled the doorknob and discovered it was locked. Guess I won't be able to go in here, because there's no way this big ass wheelchair is going to fit through the window. I must have made noise while attempting to enter the trailer, because I encountered my first zombie shortly after doing so. I pushed the zombie over using my stubby appendages, and then rolled over his head with the wheels of my wheelchair until his skull exploded, and brain matter would splatter all over the sidewalk. On the way to the next trailer, I saw a few zombies gathered, so I tried to stay as far away from them as possible in an effort not to be seen. I was really trying to avoid fighting as much as possible, because fighting would be the most dangerous thing I could do until I'm able to make a prosthetic for my arms. The mod that I'm using allows me to make and wear a prosthetic. First though, I would need to find a prosthetic magazine to learn how to craft it. Downtown Riverside has a large bookstore that should have the magazine in stock, but that area of town has the largest zombie population. This was going to be tough, and the whole quadruple amputee thing is not going to make it any easier. While searching for the next trailer, I realized it would be very important to get out of such a rural area if I was going to survive. I began wheeling my way northeast in search of civilization. It definitely was slow going, but eventually I ended up at an auto shop on the outskirts of the trailer park. A couple of stragglers were in the area, and slowly but surely I was able to take them out by rolling over their necks, and when the group was finally dead, I started rolling around the building in search of an open door. Both of the garage doors were locked, and the front door was the same. There was no way to enter, so I simply had to move on in hopes that the diner next door would be different. Heading over, I made my way over the door, and probably the worst case scenario happened. The building's alarm was triggered, and it was calling every zombie to my location. Undead were pouring out from in between the trees, and they were on their way to eat me. Darting into the woods, I began to bob and weave my way through the trees, luckily losing a good chunk of the horde. In a panic though, I went back towards the top of the trailer, in an effort to lose the few that were still on my trail. Thankfully, I did lose them. At this point, I've realized I have no idea how long it has been in game. Keeping this in mind, I began making my way towards Riverside again. Hopefully, there would be no more close calls. After a bit, I made it to the main road and started following it. After a really long walk, which felt like way longer because I can't sprint, I arrived at a quiet little farmhouse. Scoping out both sides, I discovered that there were zombies on either side of the farmhouse, and I was going to need to fight a group en route to the front door. So I chose the left side and began carefully leading the zombies over one by one. It definitely took a while, but I was able to safely take them out. From one of the zombies' bodies, I was able to get a watch, which allows me to now tell what time it is. Arriving by the side of the house, I couldn't help but notice the large group at the end of the driveway. Of course, the side door was locked, so I had no choice but to try for the front. Fortunately, I made it inside without drawing the group's attention. There was one zombie inside, but I took him out pretty quickly with my wheelchair. When I was finally able to settle down inside the house, I noticed that I was dehydrated and hungry. It was a good thing I got here when I did. Upon searching the rest of the house, I found some sheets and covered the windows. Then I headed upstairs into a small bedroom, ending my long day with a snooze. I woke on day 2 and began making some steak inside the oven. After I finished baking my fine cuisine,
he burnt my
steak. I went outside and began exploring the rest of the farmland. There was another house on the opposite side of the land, and the back door was unlocked. Upon entering, I found some snacks in the cabinet, as well as some food inside the fridge. Like the other houses, canned food was plentiful, but because of my stubs, I can't really use a can opener. Other than that, the tiny farmhouse did not yield much, so I continued on my route from the day prior. Despite the amount of zombies on the way there, I eventually made it to town. Emerging from the forest, I entered a house and started looking around. But that's when some banging started to come from the front door, and upon further inspection, there was no back exit. All I could do was open the front door and try to get past this group of zombies that had gathered. Zombies were ripping out the clothes on my back. I just barely made by them. The next 3 houses were locked. I had no choice but to go into the trees and hope I lost the group. It took quite a while to lose the horde. It was nighttime now, and I decided to settle into this house. My clothes were ripped and I was covered in blood. I washed myself in the kitchen sink the best I could and drifted out to sleep in the bedroom. I arrived at the Riverside police station.
Where your clothes at?
Unfortunately, all the doors were locked. I guess that's alright, since I can't really hold any weapons I would find inside. Wheeling my way across the street, I entered a restaurant. I had drawn some attention to myself. I quickly took these two zombies out. I was able to redress myself with some dead zombie clothes. A larger group had gathered on the other side of the building while I was fighting the zombies though, so I took this as a sign to see my way out. The rest of day 3 was leading up for the next day. The plan for tomorrow is to scope out the area downtown and see what we're working with. If I'm able to reach the bookstore safely, we will hopefully find the magazine. Night came quickly, and with only the TV to brighten the small house, John fell asleep. Day 4 begins with me crunching on some uncooked pasta. A quick scan of the neighborhood shortly after reveals a large zombie population this morning. This is going to be a common theme for the rest of the day. Moving towards the downtown, I run into some trouble. I received my first injury here, a scratch on my upper left arm. Could have been a lot worse considering I'm dog shit at this game. Soon I arrived at a large building that turned out to be the far left side of the shopping center. I wasn't too far from the bookstore now. Upon entering, it took me a good minute to realize that this wasn't the bookstore, rather a VHS shop. Turns out the bookstore is just a little bit farther to the east. Great. I decided to head out after finishing up a quick sweep of the place. Not without taking out this zombie first. I decided to check out the rest of the shopping center. Maybe I could find some food to stock up on. Checking out this shop at the end of the plaza, I snagged only the necessities and left out the back, trying to avoid the zombies gathering at the front. I couldn't avoid these two though, but I managed to take them down pretty easily. Unfortunately, after leaving the alley, I started to attract quite the horde. There were some close calls, but after going through this neighborhood, I lost most of them. Sometime later, I arrived at the main shopping district and entered through the back. It was just a toy store. Nothing would be useful for me here. Entering the street, I realized there were way too many zombies in the area. It was around this time that it became apparent I needed some food and water desperately. So even though I was super close to the bookstore, I had no choice but to try again tomorrow. Today would be different from the last. I was going to get that damn magazine today. War paint applied, I entered the downtown area. It was a wet, gloomy day, and I could only hope that the loot wouldn't reflect the weather. Soon, the horde was quickly on my trail as I scurried inside this clothing store. They were banging at the door, but thankfully there was a back exit to escape into. After entering into the next building, I took out these two zombies. A quick look into the place revealed a group at the front of the store. Yeah, I'm just gonna head out. I was very close to the bookstore. It was just in the next parking lot. Naturally, I made a roll for it. Not without drawing quite a bit of attention to myself though. The horde was growing the closer I got to the bookstore. I just barely managed to close the door behind me. Searching the shelves frantically, my hope was diminishing by the second. Not a magazine in sight. The banging of the doors and windows felt like it was getting louder and louder until the windows finally gave in. I had to make a shot for the door, so I led these two around the table and went for it. I was okay, but I didn't have the magazine. The walk to shelter was somber. I had zero idea what to do next. Entering this broken house, my morale was at an all-time low. I ate some food and then entered the living room to find the fucking magazine. A quick search around the rest of the house revealed a large hiking bag, and that I had every item I needed for the prosthetic except the planks. This was going to be a problem because there was only 3 ways to get planks: chopping down trees, knocking down doors, and finding them by chance. Because of obvious reasons, 2 were immediately not going to work. The only thing I could do was hope I would find some, and the best chance of doing so was at the factory warehouse, and that was quite a trip away. It had the best odds though, so I decided tomorrow I would begin the arduous trip there. So I went to bed, hopeful for what was to come of this run. The trip was long and tiring. Many zombies fell along the way, and just when I couldn't stand to keep going much longer, I arrived at the warehouse. A group had gathered in the area, but I was able to lure them away and slowly take them down. It was very slow going, but one could hope it would be worth it in the end. Upon rounding the corner of the building, 2 more were drawn to me, and I killed them as well. After encountering 4 separate locked doors, I found that the front door was unlocked. Entering the building, I took out a few more undead until I was able to search the many boxes inside. I found the planks in the first 2 boxes, and I immediately began entering the side room to begin crafting the hook. With the hook now equipped, I could finally hold a weapon. This was going to make things way easier for the rest of the run. With my newly equipped hammer, I curled up on this comfy plastic chair and slept after a long walk. I wake up and began patrolling the warehouse, starting the day by deconstructing some boxes for planks. I wanted to begin making the place safe by barricading the doors and the windows. So that's what I did. And after a long day of placing planks, the worst possible thing that could happen did. The helicopter event began. In Project Zomboid, the helicopter event happens between days 6 and 9. Now, I've experienced it multiple times before, but usually I'm able to lock myself in a room and nothing really happens. This time though, I didn't have that luxury and zombies were being drawn to my location. It was also at this time, 2 zombies were breaking down my door, but I couldn't hear it because of the helicopter and the loud banging of my hammer. This was really bad. My base was compromised and the zombie population was about to be a lot higher. I decided my only chance was to try to make it to the factory across the lot. If I could make it there, I might be able to survive till the end of the helicopter event. With my hammer equipped, I began making my way across the parking lot. It was worse than I thought. The horde was massive. During the fight, I was scratched a few times. All I could really do was bandage myself up and keep trying to make it to shelter. During this long fight, the night fell, and under the cover of darkness, I was eventually able to make it into the main factory. Roaming the the halls, I entered the kitchen in an effort to grab some food and to sustain myself. This was another mistake, because a large group of zombies had seen me through the window. They began pouring into the lunchroom, and the second battle of the night began. I tried to fight my way back through the halls, but it was obvious that this was not going to end well. Unfortunately, as I was fleeing, I realized I had sustained an injury that there was no coming back from. John was infected. With nothing left to do, I ran back to my overrun base and hid upstairs. What's one more amputation, I guess?